Hello friends, today I'm going to be doing a quick tutorial on how to use the Cloudspire mod in Tabletop Simulator, since I see a lot of people having issues with clunkiness of chips or things exploding, and I can understand that because there are some unfortunate things that happen with the Tabletop Simulator mod if you are unfamiliar with how to work it. So first, just the super basics. In order to move my camera like this, I'm holding the center mouse wheel on my mouse. You can also use WASD to do a similar thing. In order to rotate your camera, you hold right click and you drag, and that'll rotate your camera in the direction in that direction. All of the islands are located here in this bag, labeled islands, and you just drag them out, and they should be upside down when you drag them out. Notice that when I place it, it places directly into the slots of the islands. I don't think most people have an issue with this, but I will point out that the reason that it does this is because there's a grid, an invisible grid that you cannot see, where it will snap into place with. And that goes for all of the chips as well. Each of the chips should be snapping directly into the center of every single hex if you place it down. If you highlight a chip and press Control C, or if you hover over a chip and press Control C, you will copy it. Now, so long as you are promoted, which is something that will be important if you are not the host, you will be able to paste objects as well. Control V is how you do that, and that will just simply create an exact copy of whatever it is that you just pasted. Now notice, as I'm pasting them, I can paste them pretty much anywhere I want to, but they still snap directly into the center of each of these hexes. If you want if you want a unit with 3 health, you can simply hover over one hex, press Control V twice, and now you have 3 health chips on one hex. Now let's get a unit. Each of the factions has their own drawer, denoted by their faction name here. In order to get to the faction, you simply hover over this handle here and click, and the faction should show up. Sometimes it will glitch and the faction will fall through the table. I don't know exactly why that happens or how to fix that, other than rewinding time. Now, each faction has their reference sheet, their fortress, and all of their chips and their dice located on a tray. Before clicking this tray, change your lift height to at least halfway up. Then when you click the tray, you should be able to just drag it out all the way. If you did not do this, what would happen, let's put my left height lower. If you do not do this, what's going to happen is the tray is not actually above the table, so the chips aren't actually getting above the table as well, which means they're crashing into the table and through the tray. So when I let go, it explodes. So that is something to avoid. Whoever is hosting the game can rewind by using this top button here, which will let you go 10 seconds back in time. Yeah. So once you have your chips set up, you should be able to just drag them in place. So I have this 3 health chips here, and I'm going to put dispatch. In order to move the dispatch around, instead of highlighting it and dragging the entire thing like most people do, what I recommend is just clicking the bottom chip and moving it like that. That way, it'll always snap everything back into place. And if you have a stack of units, like 1, 2, 3, like a Battleborn dispatcher example, instead of being used to highlighting the whole thing and trying to figure out when it stops highlighting, you can just highlight the bottom health chip and move along. And as I mentioned, everything will snap into place, so when you're moving along, so long as everything is still on the grid, it will be fine. If you find yourself in a situation where the grid and the hexes are not matching up, what's likely happened is that the map was placed wrong. So, for example, if I put this like this, it's snapping to the grid, but the grid isn't aligned with the hexes. So, do not move the center aisle from where it is. Keep it in the position it is, and just work around that instead. It doesn't change gameplay. It just maybe you might end up going a little bit in an angle that you might not otherwise want to because you wanted to get a mountain or something, and you wanted to be on this side. So just don't mess with the angle of the island, and you should be fine. In order to give, so we've covered how to give units health is by copy pasting, and the reason we can do this is because health is an infinite resource in Cloudspire. You cannot run out of health no matter how many health chips you put. Not that you ever would in a real game, but it just is significantly easier. For getting rid of their health, you can highlight a health chip and press the delete key on your keyboard, making sure that you're not highlighting anything. So for example, if I was highlighting this dispatch because I didn't follow my advice from before, and then I wanted to take away the health on this Battleborn, I'd click the delete key, and that would delete the dispatch. So don't do that. I strongly recommend that when you're moving, you do not highlight the units. You simply click the bottom and move along. Now, the mod also has the range, attack, and fortification chips located on the right side. You just simply drag them out to get the range, attack, and fortification chips. Unfortunately, unlike health, you cannot copy and paste these. So you do have to do all of the annoying pull it off, then put it in, and then pull it back on. But that's while it's a slow process, it's still a relatively fast process in terms of game time. So it should not be that much of an issue. The mod also has these counting health chips, which is the exact same health chips, but they have stackable set. And I'm going to show what the difference is here. So this is a preference. Not everybody likes this. But if I have a stack of 6 health chips here, it'll actually show by hovering over that it has 6 health chips. If I delete on this one, it'll delete the entire stack because the game considers it one object. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So instead, if I had, say, a dispatch with 6 health somehow, and I wanted to remove health from it, I would drag it in the same way that you drag from the bags. Just drag it off, and it should reduce the health and take the health onto somewhere else. The reason that these might not be preferable is because they have a tendency to glitch, where the units on top will fall into the chips itself. The way you fix that, let's pretend that I can't obviously make the glitch happen. I don't know what causes it. I don't think anybody does. But what I do know is if the glitch does end up happening, you simply put another health chip on top and then drag it off, and it should fix itself. Just like with the basic health chips, you just grab and move. But because these are one object and they have this pulling function, you have to actually hold on them until they move up before you can start moving, which will slow down your game a little bit, but not in a noticeable amount. This is good for people who really just want to keep track without counting, or for bigger units like Forsaken, which have a lot of health, and you need to make sure you're getting the correct amount of health on them without feeling like somebody's cheating. Yeah, so with the mod, I also have, in my personal version, these spires. Let's take a Brownin spire. They're all color-coded. The Brownins are the most boring because they're the Brownin. They're very small compared to something like a real-life spire, and they're not necessarily themed in the same way that you might expect. The only reason these are here is twofold. One, they can count the number of spires that are in play to make sure that nobody's going over the spire limit. And 2, it gives a visual representation of a spire. So I can do this range and attack and put a dispatch platform here. And now this looks a lot more like there's a spire here for people who desperately want that visualization. You are not required to use these, but I do strongly recommend it because it does make keeping track of everything much easier for the opponent, and we do not want to be hiding information from other people. Yeah. In order to use spires, we do use these spire dice. There's an infinite bag located on the left side, which means that I can pull any number of spire dice out. For spires, in order to fire them, you highlight the dice and you press R. I recommend doing it 2 or 3 times just to make sure that it flies into the air so that people don't think that you're like cheating, because you can choose the face by pressing the number of the key, which looks like it's rolling if you are on a specific face. So I do recommend that you press R a few times just to show that you are not in control. We also have this bag full of spire pegs, not spire pegs, fortress advancement pegs. When you have the fortress, each fortress has their advancements with little invisible points here that will ignore the grid points. So normally when I put the spire peg here, this advancement peg here, it'll go towards the center of each of the hexes. But I can also put it directly onto each of the fortress advancement positions. I can also put spires on the fortress source walls and units on the hex, on the fortress gate hex. So keep that in mind. We do want to make sure that people are using their limited build option pegs, just to make sure that we're keeping track of how many spires are being built in a turn, or how many upgrade options are being built in a turn. Now, normally in a game of Cloudspire, you'd have your 2 tracking chips. You'd have your source tracker and your health tracker chip, and these are provided in the mod, but because of the nature of the mod, where you can't really rotate in a very specific way, you can get it, but like right here, this is pretty ambiguous. Is this 9 or 10? If you really wanted to argue one or the other, you could, and that becomes a lot less important with health, since you're most likely going to be on the very thick side, but it's going to be very important when you're trying to track between 18 and 19. So I would recommend that you don't use these. If you and your opponent both want to and the judge is okay with it, go ahead. But instead we're going to be using these. These digital trackers track source and health respectively. You can either highlight the inside and manually enter a number, or you can use the plus and minus keys to add and subtract source, and of course health as well. The downside of these is that you have to actually remember that the maximum source count is 20, unless you have a fortress advancement that says otherwise, and the maximum health count is 10 unless you have a fortress advancement or ability that says otherwise. It should not be difficult to remember, but it might be problematic for some people, so just keep that in mind. In order to rotate in the way I was just rotating, you press the Q and E keys. The rotation degrees is located up here. I recommend 15 as it gives you the most control, but you can do more. So for example, if I have this here, I personally like 15 degrees because it gives me the ability to do this, but you might like only clicking once. So you would go and use 60 degrees. I personally find it way too fast, so that's why I do not do that. So I just keep it at 15 degrees. Um, Once you are satisfied with a position and you don't want to move something, you press L on the keyboard to lock it into place. It no longer can be interacted with in any way. So I can freely move this dispatch along this way and highlight it and move it along, and it will not mess up the board. So locking is very important. You would do that with your fortress, and you would do that with your health chips here. And I also recommend doing it with your barracks, locking it into place so you can grab your chips without grabbing the whole thing and knocking everything out of place. Let's see what else. So landmarks, they should be set up ahead of time, or we will be having a special way of setting them up that's not in this mod, because we want to make sure every game is consistent. Each of the starting landmarks means that is the swamp landmarks. They are located here, and every other landmark is located here. Once all of the swamp landmarks for the starting positions have been placed, you simply drag the new swamps into the rest of the landmarks and shuffle by pressing the R key, and then setting up. If you have a unit and you want to explore, but you do not want to show your opponent what is underneath, pressing Alt gives you an enlarged image, and you can use the mouse wheel to increase or lower that size on the Alt image. And by holding the Shift key, you can see the other side of the image. Note that there's this eyeball that pops up. Everybody who's in the game can see that eyeball, not just you. And there's also going to be on the bottom left a text information to the opponent that you were looking at this particular landmark. But yeah, it does not show them what is underneath the landmark. It just shows you. And you can choose after that to flip by pressing F. Otherwise, you'd be doing the exact same thing. You might wonder how I've been doing this arrow this entire time. If you hold still on your mouse and press Tab, that creates an arrow. If you hold the Tab key and move, you create a line. The line and the arrow will be of your player color, which you'll be prompted to select when you start Tabletop Simulator. Unless you're the host, in which case it'll be white. And you can change your color at any time. Yeah, so all of the reference sheets will be here. We have the landmark and caused by reference sheets located up here. We have the new rules changes that are coming with the Kickstarter. These are going to be in effect. And yeah. For the tournament, there should only be 3 events available. And this should not be shuffled. Do not shuffle this because the order is supposed to be consistent between games. Each game's supposed to have the exact same events in the exact same order. We just don't know what they are until the game starts. That way we have a very consistent, streamlined way of determining that randomness is not really a factor in whether somebody won or lost in this game. Anyway, guys, I hope you found this helpful. If there are any questions, anything that I did that you don't understand exactly how I was doing, let us know. And I hope you have a good day.